I am Isabella Chen, 35 years old, and I am the financial backbone my family both relies on and resents. I spent the last decade transforming my father's modest real estate business into a multinational empire, all while my mother and older sister spread rumors throughout San Francisco's elite community that I am the family embarrassment. Yesterday, my sister's wedding coordinator called. My invitation to her wedding was officially revoked. My mother, Patricia, still expected to keep the $150,000 deposit I had paid for the entire event. I told the coordinator to cancel everything. She gasped on the other end of the line. "But ma'am, you are not the bride." I calmly responded, "No, but I own the venue, the floral company, and the entire luxury resort chain they booked for their guests." Before I continue, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. If you feel my words, show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And tell me from which city you belong, so I can see how far a woman's impactful voice can reach. Help me build this community so we can bring more truthful stories for you. The morning began like any other Tuesday. I was in my corner office on the 42nd floor overlooking the San Francisco Bay, running what the world knows as Chen Global Investments. To outsiders, it appears to be a private investment firm specializing in luxury properties. In reality, it is the corporate umbrella I use to manage the Chen real estate empire, the legacy my father entrusted to me. Much to my family's eternal horror, I was reviewing architectural renderings for our new Singapore development when my private line rang. The number was unfamiliar, but my assistant, Monica, patched it through anyway. The caller ID displayed Sofia Martinez Events. I knew immediately what this call would be about. My older sister, Victoria, was getting married in 3 weeks to some venture capitalist from old money, and I had been dreading this moment. "Miss Chen," the voice on the other end was shaking slightly. "This is Sofia Martinez. I'm the coordinator for your sister's wedding at the Chen Palazzo Resort." I leaned back in my ergonomic chair and turned to face the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Yes, Sophia, I have been expecting your call." She paused, clearly caught off guard by my composure. "Oh, well, Miss Chen, I have to make a very uncomfortable call. Your mother, Mrs. Patricia Chen, just finished speaking with me. She has given me explicit instructions to officially revoke your invitation to the wedding." I watched a sailboat glide across the bay far below, feeling nothing but a familiar, cold detachment. This was the game my family had perfected over the years. "I understand," I said simply, my voice neutral. Sophia seemed to panic at my lack of emotional response. "Miss Chen, that is not even the most difficult part." I waited, already knowing what was coming next. "Mrs. Chen also instructed me to retain the $150,000 deposit you paid to secure the venue, catering, and floral arrangements. She claims you explicitly told her it was a gift to the family, and that the funds should now be managed entirely by your sister Victoria for all remaining wedding expenses." I almost smiled at the audacity. Of course she did. Sophia continued, her words tumbling out rapidly. "Miss Chen, I cannot legally do that without your written authorization. But your mother is threatening to destroy my business if I do not comply with her demands. She said she told everyone you were unreliable, that you have caused problems for the family, and that she was taking control of the situation." I do not know what to do. Here it was, the final chess move in their decade-long campaign of humiliation. They did not just want to erase me from their lives. They wanted to rod me blind on their way out the door. "Sophia," I said finally, allowing the ice to creep into my voice. "You are the coordinator for the Victoria Chen wedding at the Chen Palazzo Resort, correct?" "Yes, Miss Chen." "That is correct." "Good," I interrupted. "Now I want you to check your email. I am sending you my actual contact information right now. You are no longer speaking to Isabella Chen, the black sheep sister. You are speaking to the sole owner of the Chen Palazzo Resort, Martinez Premier Florals, and the entire Golden Gate luxury resort chain." There was a sharp intake of breath on her end. "I see, Miss Chen. And what about the deposit?" What about the $150,000 you paid to secure everything? That is actually the primary issue. Miss Chen, your mother was very specific and very insistent. She claimed the deposit was a gift from you to your sister. She demanded that my company retain the funds and apply them toward the remaining balance. She said you would not dispute it because you owed the family. I let the silence hang heavy between us. This was the ultimate insult. They did not just want me gone from their celebration. They wanted to use my money to fund their party while simultaneously spitting in my face. The sheer audacity was almost admirable in its cruelty. Sophia, I said, and my voice dropped to a temperature so cold it surprised even me. Cancel the entire wedding. What? Miss Chen, I cannot do that. I am just the coordinator. I do not have that kind of authority. You are not the bride or even a member of the bridal party. No, you are correct. But I am the owner of the Chen Palazzo Resort. I am also the owner of Martinez Premier Florals, which you are currently contracted through. And I am the chief executive officer of the Golden Gate Luxury Resort chain, where all 250 of your guests have their accommodations booked. You will cancel every single reservation immediately. Then you will send my mother and my sister the full cancellation invoice, including all penalty fees. Am I making myself clear? I heard a small, choked sound from her end of the line. Yes, Miss Chen, perfectly clear. Good, I said. Thank you for bringing this matter to my attention, Sophia. I hung up before she could respond. I stood and walked slowly to the panoramic window, looking down at the city I had quietly conquered over the past 10 years. My expression was hard, my jaw set. My mother and Victoria were greedy and vindictive, but they were not strategic masterminds. This level of calculated social assassination, this bold move to seize my money while publicly shaming me, had the unmistakable fingerprints of only one person. My sister's fiancé's family. More specifically, his mother, Constance Worthington, a woman who represented everything old money and social hierarchy. She had just made the most catastrophic mistake of her privileged life. My hands were still clenched as I turned away from the window. My gaze fell on the single-framed photograph I kept on my desk. It was me at 25, standing beside my father, Richard Chen, on the rooftop of our first major property, the San Francisco flagship building. The city stretched out endlessly behind us. He looked so incredibly proud, his arm around my shoulders, his smile wide and genuine. My father was not just a successful businessman. He was a legend in the Asian American business community, a man who had built an empire from a single struggling apartment complex he purchased with borrowed money. He was a man who saw potential in me, not just as his daughter, but as his true successor. The memory of his will reading 10 years ago flooded back into my consciousness with brutal clarity. The tension in that sterile conference room had been suffocating. My mother, Patricia, sat in the front row dressed in designer black, looking more irritated than heartbroken by my father's passing. My older sister, Victoria, sat beside her, checking her phone every few minutes, clearly treating this as nothing more than a tedious formality before her inevitable coronation as the head of the family business. The family attorney, Mr. Caldwell, finally cleared his throat and began reading the document aloud. He went through the smaller bequests first. The San Francisco house went to my mother. The beach house in Malibu went to my aunt. Small financial stipends were distributed to various cousins and distant relatives. Then he reached the final section of the will, the one that mattered. And now, he said, adjusting his reading glasses, regarding the controlling interest in Chen Properties International and all associated holdings. Victoria visibly straightened in her seat, smoothing down her dress with a small, smug smile playing at the corners of her perfectly painted lips. My mother looked at her with pure, unadulterated adoration, already seeing her daughter as the powerful matriarch she had always wanted her to be. Mr. Caldwell continued, his voice steady and professional. All controlling shares of Chen Properties International, including all real estate holdings, commercial properties, investment portfolios, and related business assets, shall be bequeathed in their entirety to my youngest daughter, Isabella Marie Chen. The air in the room seemed to crack and splinter. My mother, Patricia, shot to her feet so fast her chair scraped loudly against the polished floor. Her silk veil trembled with the force of her rage. "What?" she screamed, the sound echoing off the wood-paneled walls. "What did you just say?" Mr. Caldwell simply looked at her over the rim of his glasses, his expression neutral and unreadable. "Pa, strong Richard must have been ill," she shrieked, turning to my sister Victoria. "He was out of his mind. Victoria, he was senile at the end. Isabella is just a child, a 25-year-old girl who knows absolutely nothing about running a business." Victoria stood up slowly, her face transforming into a mask of absolute fury. She pointed a shaking, manicured finger directly at me where I still sat quietly in my chair. "This is completely absurd," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "It has to be a mistake or some kind of sick joke. I am the eldest daughter. I went to business school at Stanford, just like he wanted. I have been working alongside him for years." She gestured wildly at me, her diamond bracelet catching the light. "Isabella has been off finding herself, wasting time, working menial jobs in Dad's properties. She has been cleaning apartments and answering phones and doing grunt work. She knows nothing about corporate strategy or high-level finance or boardroom negotiations. This is an absolute insult to everything I've worked for." "She is right," my mother chimed in, immediately rushing to Victoria's side as she always did. "Victoria is the face of this family, Patricia, the one everyone respects. She is a behind-the-scenes person at best. She is not a leader. She does not have the presence or the network or the sophistication. This will destroy everything Richard built." I finally stood up slowly. My legs felt surprisingly steady, even though my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I looked at my sister, then at my mother, and I spoke for the first time since entering that room. "He was not senile," I said, my voice quiet but cutting through their hysteria like a blade. "And he knew exactly what he was doing when he made this decision." "What would you possibly know?" Victoria sneered at me, her lips curling. "You were too busy scrubbing floors and filing paperwork to understand anything about finance or real business." "I know that Dad wanted his successor to understand the business from the ground up," I said, meeting her furious gaze without flinching. "Not just from the safety of a boardroom or a corporate office. He sent you to Stanford, yes, but he sent me to work. I have spent the last 5 years working in property management in Los Angeles, in tenant relations in Seattle, in maintenance coordination in Portland, in leasing offices in San Diego, and in financial operations right here in San Francisco. I did not just file paperwork, Victoria. I learned logistics, staffing protocols, operations systems, tenant retention strategies, and revenue optimization. I know every single weakness in this company, and I know every strength. I understand this business in a way you never will, because you have only ever seen it from the top floor." My mother stared at me as if I had suddenly grown a second head. "You will destroy everything Richard built," she declared, her voice rising again in pitch. "You will run his entire legacy into the ground, with your naive idealism and your limited perspective, and your complete lack of social connections. I will not stand for this, Isabella. Do you hear me? I will never accept this. Never." I did not have to wait long for the next phase of their attack. My phone, which had been mercifully silent for exactly 2 minutes, lit up again. The caller identification simply read, "Mother." I let it ring 4 times, took a slow, deliberate breath, and answered, placing the call on speaker so I could continue working. "Isabella Chen, what have you done?" Her voice was a shriek so piercing it almost distorted through the phone's speaker. I could picture her perfectly, standing in her pristine white and gold kitchen, clutching her Hermes scarf with one hand and her phone with the other. Her face contorted in absolute outrage. "The resort just called, Victoria," she screamed without even waiting for me to respond. "They said the wedding is canceled. Canceled. Do you have any idea what this means? Do you comprehend the level of humiliation you have just brought upon this family? The Worthingtons are going to think we are absolute trash, Isabella. Complete and utter trash. I continued reviewing the document on my screen, my voice calm. Hello, Mother. I see Sophia reached out to you faster than I anticipated. Do not you dare hello mother me, she shrieked again. You fix this right now. You call them back immediately and you tell them you made a terrible mistake. You tell them you were confused or emotional, or I do not care what lie you fabricate. But you fix this situation immediately. There's nothing to fix, I said, my tone flat and emotionless. I simply withdrew my financial support for an event I was explicitly uninvited from. You cannot simultaneously take my money and exclude me from the celebration, Mother. It simply does not work that way in any logical universe. There was a sudden, sharp silence on the other end. She had clearly expected me to grovel, to apologize profusely, to be desperate to crawl back into her good graces. My calm, measured defiance threw her completely off whatever script she had prepared. When she spoke again, her voice had changed, dropping to a lower register that trembled with a different, more dangerous kind of rage. Withdrew your funding, she repeated slowly. How dare you, Isabella? That money was a gift to your sister. It was a generous gift for her wedding, for her future. It stopped being a gift the moment you and Victoria and the Worthingtons decided to steal it while simultaneously erasing me from the guest list, I replied. You cannot demand a gift and then spit in the giver's face, Mother. This is pure jealousy, Isabella, she hissed. It has always been jealousy with you. You could not stand to see your older sister finally get the spotlight and recognition she deserves. You could not stand that she is marrying into such a prominent, respected family, while you hide in that sterile office all day doing whatever it is you do. You had to ruin her moment because you are bitter and alone and resentful. Mother, I said, cutting her off mid-rant, this conversation is finished. The wedding is canceled. You and Victoria can figure out how to pay for a new one entirely on your own. But you will not be using my properties, my vendors, or my money, period. You ungrateful child, she stammered, completely losing whatever composure she had left. You are trying to embarrass me. You are trying to humiliate your sister in front of the Worthingtons and their entire social circle. No, I said, you did that entirely by yourselves. You just never imagined you would be the ones forced to pay the consequences. I ended the call while she was still shouting my name, her voice echoing through the speaker. I knew with absolute certainty that this was nowhere close to being over. This was merely the opening salvo. I pressed the intercom button. Monica, hold all my calls except for one. I have a very strong feeling my sister will be calling next, and I want to take that particular call. There was a brief, stunned silence on Monica's end before she replied. Yes, Miss Chen, understood. Tense silence on my mother's end of the line was eventually replaced by the sound of her ragged, uneven breathing. When she finally spoke again, her voice had undergone a complete transformation. The shrieking rage had vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating tone that was, in its own way, far more menacing and dangerous. Isabella, that was a mistake, she said, her voice dripping with forced patience, as if she were speaking to a small child throwing a tantrum in public. This is all just a terrible misunderstanding. I waited, saying nothing, letting her continue. A misunderstanding, she repeated, her tone becoming almost syrupy. You see, Victoria's fiancé, his family, the Worthingtons, they are very traditional people. Traditional, I repeated, letting the word hang in the air between us. Is that what we are calling this situation now? They come from a very different world than ours, Isabella, she snapped, her condescension returning immediately. They are old money. They have been part of San Francisco society for generations. They have certain expectations about appearances, about hierarchy, about how families should present themselves publicly. They found it peculiar that the younger daughter was so much more, she hesitated, clearly searching for the right word, so much more established and prominent than the older daughter. Constance, that is Mrs. Worthington. She simply thought it would be better for Victoria's image, for her position in the marriage. If Victoria appeared to be the successful one, the provider, the one with real status and power, it is about image, Isabella. She was only trying to help your sister. So she helps Victoria by erasing me from the family photograph, I said, the coldness in my voice matching hers perfectly. By canceling my invitation and then demanding to keep my money? You're telling me she committed outright theft, simply to protect my sister's fragile ego and maintain some absurd social fiction. It is not theft if it stays within the family, she hissed back. It was just a small adjustment, a minor recalibration to make everyone comfortable, to make the situation less awkward for the Worthingtons. I was not comfortable, I stated flatly. I was disrespected, humiliated, and financially exploited. And I will not pay $150,000 for the privilege of being treated like garbage by my own family. I do not care about your feelings or your comfort, Isabella, she said, and the mask of false patience finally shattered completely. Her shriek returned, louder and more desperate this time. I do not care about your pride or your sense of fairness. I promised Constance Worthington a wedding that would be the talk of San Francisco society. I promised her family that everything would be perfect and elegant and flawless. You will not ruin this for me, Isabella. You will not ruin this for your sister. You will call that resort back right now and you will restore everything exactly as it was. You owe Victoria that much at the absolute minimum. I stood up from my desk slowly, deliberately. This conversation had run its course. I do not owe her anything, I said, my voice final and absolute. And I certainly do not owe you anything either, Mother. You should know better than anyone not to threaten the person who controls your finances. I ended the call. For a full minute, I simply stared at my phone in the absolute silence of my office. Then, I pressed the intercom button again. Monica, I said, get our legal team on the line immediately. I want all family trust funds frozen within the hour. Before Monica could even respond, my office doors burst open with such force they slammed against the walls. Victoria stormed in, her face flushed and blotchy, looking exactly like the entitled, overgrown sorority president she had always been. But the real force of nature, the true power behind this invasion, was the woman walking beside her. Constance Worthington. She was exactly as I had imagined her. Tall, impossibly thin, impeccably dressed in a severe Chanel suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She was old money personified, and she carried herself with an air of absolute, unshakable superiority. She looked around my office with her lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval, as if the entire space, despite its luxury and commanding view, was somehow beneath her standards. "What the hell do you think you are doing, Bella?" Victoria yelled, slamming her hands down on my desk. She had not called me Isabella in years. It was always Bella, a diminutive I despised. I slowly looked up from my computer screen, removed my reading glasses with deliberate precision, and placed them carefully on my desk. "Good morning, Victoria. Mrs. Worthington. I was not aware we had scheduled a meeting." "Cut the corporate formality," Victoria snapped. "You know exactly why we are here. You froze the accounts. You froze my account. You froze Mother's account. She has been calling me non-stop all morning, completely hysterical. You need to unlock those funds immediately." Constance remained silent for the moment, watching me with cold, analytical blue eyes, studying me as if I were a problem to be solved, or, more accurately, an obstacle to be removed. I leaned back in my chair, keeping my expression neutral. "The family trust fund is not an entitlement, Victoria. It is a discretionary benefit paid out by the corporation, Chen Properties International. And as the chief executive officer of that corporation, I have a fiduciary duty to review all non-essential expenditures carefully." "Non-essential?" Victoria's voice rose to a near shriek. "My life is non-essential? Mother's expenses are non-essential? Your $5,000 shopping trips and Mother's monthly excursions to Paris are certainly non-essential," I replied calmly. The corporation is simply conducting a thorough review of all overhead expenses. Resources are finite. You are worth billions. Isabella, Victoria shouted. The corporation is worth billions, I corrected her. And I have a responsibility to protect the corporation's interests at all times, regardless of personal relationships. Constance finally spoke. Her voice was exactly as I had imagined it. Cold, precise, clipped, and utterly dismissive. She placed one perfectly manicured hand on Victoria's arm, instantly silencing her sputtering protests. Victoria, darling, that is quite enough. You are allowing her to upset you, and that gives her power. She turned her cold gaze fully on me, taking a step closer to my desk. Her expensive perfume filled the immediate space. Isabella, she said, pronouncing my name as if it were distasteful. Let us stop this childish little power game you are playing. I do not know who you think you are frightening with this performance, but this entire charade is tiresome and frankly beneath all of us. She took another deliberate step closer, her eyes never leaving mine. My husband is Judge Christopher Worthington. I am quite certain you are aware of his name and his reputation. He is a very influential man in this city. He has deep connections in every sector, including banking, real estate development, and yes, hospitality regulation. She let the threat hang in the air between us, clearly expecting me to flinch. It would be a terrible shame, she continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper, if your modest little property management operations suddenly encountered, shall we say, unexpected regulatory scrutiny. A few strategic phone calls from the right people, and this impressive office of yours could be facing a very thorough and very inconvenient audit from multiple city agencies. Are we understanding each other now, Isabella? I met her gaze directly, unflinching. She was skilled at this, I had to admit. She was accustomed to wielding her family's power and social connections like a weapon, and she clearly believed this was her ultimate trump card. She thought I was just some small-time property manager who had lucked into a position of minor authority. She had absolutely no idea who she was actually dealing with. I allowed a small, cold smile to touch my lips. A judge? I said. That is certainly impressive, Mrs. Worthington. I would very much like to meet him someday. In fact, please give him my warmest regards when you see him next. I leaned forward slightly, folding my hands on my desk. And when you do speak with him, perhaps the three of us could have a frank discussion. We could talk about regulatory problems and audit threats. We could also discuss why exactly a member of your family, specifically you, felt it was appropriate to instruct my wedding vendors that my $150,000 deposit was actually a gift, and that it should be kept and redistributed without my consent. The reaction was immediate and deeply satisfying. Constance's perfectly plucked eyebrows shot up, and for the first time, her mask of icy superiority cracked. A flicker of genuine panic flashed across her face before she managed to suppress it. Victoria just looked confused, glancing between us. What? What are you talking about, Bella? Mrs. Worthington knows exactly what I am talking about, I said, never taking my eyes off Constance. She knows that she personally instructed my mother to cancel my invitation to this wedding and then to keep my substantial financial deposit. That is a very interesting move for a family so concerned with traditional appearances and proper behavior. I wonder what a man like Judge Worthington, a man dedicated to upholding the law, would call that kind of action. It sounds remarkably similar to fraud, or perhaps just common theft. Constance's face went pale beneath her expertly applied makeup. She had completely underestimated me. She had assumed I was just another walking checkbook, another disposable family member to be used and discarded. She never imagined that the checkbook had teeth, or that the checkbook actually owned the entire bank. You, she stammered, her composure fracturing, you would not dare. Dare what, Mrs. Worthington? I asked softly. Protect my own assets? Tell the truth about what actually happened? You walked into my office uninvited, threatened my business with regulatory retaliation, and now you are defending the outright theft of my money. You have exactly 60 seconds to leave this building before I have security escort you out personally. If you feel my words, show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And tell me from which city you belong, so I can see how far a woman's impactful voice can reach. Help me build this community so we can bring more truthful stories for you. Constance's carefully constructed mask of calm superiority finally cracked completely. Her face flushed a deep, angry red. She glared at me not as a future family member, but as an obstacle that needed to be eliminated. You, she spat, her voice shaking with barely controlled rage. You think you are so incredibly clever, do you not? Sitting up here in your glass tower, pulling your pathetic little strings, acting like you have real power. You are nothing, Isabella, nothing. She laughed, but it was a harsh, bitter sound that echoed unpleasantly in the quiet office. You are just a spoiled little girl who was handed an empire she did not earn and does not deserve. You have never worked for anything meaningful in your entire privileged life. You are not a real Chen. You are just the family accountant, a glorified bookkeeper. She grabbed Victoria's arm and pulled her forward, as if presenting a prize to an audience. This, she declared dramatically, this is the true face of the Chen family. This is the woman who carries the real legacy, the one who attended the right schools, who knows the right people, who has the grace and sophistication and social intelligence that actually matter in our world. She is the one who deserves to be in charge of everything. She turned her venom back toward me, her eyes narrowing to slits. And you? You are just a walking ATM machine. A bitter, jealous, small-minded woman sitting on a pile of money you do not deserve and cannot properly manage. You are lucky we even allow you to pay for things, Isabella. It is literally the only value you bring to this family. Victoria, clearly emboldened by her future mother-in-law's passionate defense, puffed up with renewed confidence. She stepped forward, her chest out. Constance is absolutely right, Bella, she sneered, using that hated nickname again. She is 100% correct about everything. You have always been jealous of me, she continued, her voice rising as she fed off her own manufactured sense of victimhood. You were jealous when we were children because I was the popular one, the one Dad always took to important business dinners and charity galas. You were jealous because I was the one everyone in our community knew and respected. She jabbed a finger in my direction accusingly. You were just the weird, awkward, quiet kid, always in the background, always counting pennies, always hiding in Dad's shadow while I shined. And you are still in his shadow, Isabella. You did not earn this company. He gave it to you out of some misguided sense of fairness or guilt. And this entire pathetic tantrum you are throwing, this whole vindictive display, it is only because I am marrying a brilliant, accomplished, powerful man from a respected family, and you have absolutely no one. You are trying to sabotage my happiness because you are bitter and alone and resentful of everything I have achieved. I let her accusation hang in the air. The silence in my office felt absolute. The only sound was Victoria's heavy, indignant breathing. Then I laughed. It was not a warm laugh or an amused laugh. It was cold, sharp, and utterly devoid of any humor whatsoever. It was the sound of a cable that had been stretched too tight for far too long, finally snapping. I stood up slowly, walking around the edge of my desk until I was standing directly in front of both of them. Victoria had to tilt her head back slightly to meet my gaze. Even Constance took an involuntary step backward. Jealous? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. You think I'm jealous of you, Victoria? You are damn right you are, she stammered, clearly trying to regain her footing and her confidence. Let me be absolutely clear about something, I said, my voice cutting through her bluster like a knife. For the last 10 years, I had been paying off your maxed-out credit cards every single month, without fail. That respect you think you have at the country club? It exists because I pay your membership dues. The luxury car you drive around the city? It is leased under the company's name. My company. Parentheses Vaughn. Victoria's face went completely white. Constance's eyes darted frantically between me and Victoria, a flicker of uncertainty finally appearing in her cold expression. You want to talk about your brilliant career, Victoria? I continued relentlessly. You have not held a single real job since Dad died. You call yourself a consultant, but you have never landed even one paying client. You call yourself a philanthropist, but every charity donation you have ever made came directly from accounts I control. I let that sink in, watching the color drain completely from my sister's face. Let us discuss your 3 disastrous failed campaigns for the Board of Supervisors, shall we? I funded every single one of them, Victoria. Every campaign sign, every fundraising dinner, every political consultant you hired and then ignored. It was all paid for by your younger sister, the one you are so obviously superior to. You were not building a political career or a legacy, Victoria. You were just spending my money and calling it ambition. I turned my cold gaze to Constance, whose expression had shifted from smug superiority to barely concealed horror. This face of the family you are so impressed with, this legacy you think you are marrying into, it is completely hollow. It is an empty shell that I have been financially propping up for a decade, just to keep our mother happy and maintain some semblance of family peace. The legacy you keep talking about is my money, Mrs. Worthington, and I'm afraid the party is officially over. I stepped back toward my desk and pressed the intercom button decisively. Monica, please send security up to my office immediately. Miss Chen and Mrs. Worthington are leaving my building now. You cannot do this, Victoria whispered, her face crumbling, all her bravado evaporating instantly. I already have, I replied simply. 2 uniformed security officers appeared at my door within seconds. Gentlemen, I said, gesturing toward Victoria and Constance, these 2 individuals do not have an appointment and are trespassing. Please escort them from the building immediately and ensure they do not return without explicit written permission. Victoria and Constance stood frozen in absolute shock. The reality of their situation was finally, truly dawning on them. They had threatened the wrong woman. They had attempted to steal from the woman who actually owned everything. Being forcibly removed from my office was not an ending for them. It was simply the beginning of their destruction. But my mother Patricia and my sister Victoria were not the type to accept defeat gracefully. They were humiliated, furious, and for the first time in their lives, truly powerless. They could not touch my money directly. They could not challenge my legal authority over the company. So they pivoted to the only weapon they had left at their disposal, my reputation, my father's carefully built name. In the insular, tightly connected world of San Francisco's elite Asian American community, reputation and legacy are absolutely everything. My father, Richard Chen, was not just a wealthy man. He was a pillar of the community, a major donor to cultural organizations, a benefactor of countless scholarships for underprivileged students. He was respected, admired, and beloved. As his widow, my mother still wielded enormous social influence throughout the city. She sat on the boards of 4 major charitable foundations. She had the personal phone numbers of every influential community leader, every respected pastor, every organization president, and she systematically began to poison every single one of them against me. She did not make any public statements or announcements. She was far too intelligent and calculating for that kind of obvious move. Instead, she conducted her campaign through private phone calls to her inner circle, through tearful conversations at charity luncheons, through carefully staged moments of maternal distress. I could picture her perfectly, sitting in her pristine living room, dabbing at her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. "Oh, Reverend Kim," she would say with a heavy sigh, "I am just so desperately worried about Isabella. The pressure of running such a large corporation at her age, It has clearly gotten to her. We have discovered financial irregularities, unexplained transactions, money disappearing from the family accounts. She is not herself anymore. She has changed. Victoria played her assigned role perfectly as well. She would sit at exclusive restaurant bars, sighing heavily into her wine glass, speaking just loudly enough for nearby tables to overhear. "I'm not directly accusing my sister of anything criminal," she would tell her circle of society friends. "I'm just saying that my attorneys are looking very carefully into where exactly all the family trust funds have gone. She has locked us out completely, cut off all access. It is deeply concerning behavior. The narrative they constructed was absolutely brilliant in its simplicity and effectiveness. It painted me as the unstable, ungrateful daughter who was not only hoarding the family legacy, but actively embezzling funds from my poor, grieving mother and my deserving older sister. It painted them as the innocent victims of my greed and instability. The whispers started almost immediately. At first, I was far too occupied running a multinational corporation to even notice the shift. But slowly, gradually, I began to see the signs. Phone calls that would normally returned within an hour now took 2 or 3 days. People who usually greeted me warmly at charity events suddenly seemed to be in a terrible hurry to leave. Business contacts who had always been friendly now seemed distant, formal, cold. The campaign was working with devastating efficiency. My mother and Victoria were successfully branding me as a thief and an unstable manipulator in my own community, systematically destroying my father's good name in their desperate, vengeful attempt to regain control of the money. The first truly serious warning came not from an attorney or a business associate, but from someone far more important to me. My phone rang on a quiet Thursday afternoon. The name on the screen made me sit up straighter in my chair. Aunt Diane. Diane was not actually my aunt by blood. She was my father's oldest and closest friend, someone he had always referred to as his sister in every way that truly mattered. She was a 70-year-old force of nature, a retired Superior Court judge who now ran the largest scholarship fund for Asian American students on the entire West Coast. My company was that fund's single largest corporate sponsor, contributing millions annually. She was, in every meaningful sense, the moral conscience of our entire community. And when Aunt Diane called, you answered immediately, and you listened carefully. "Isabella," she said. And there was none of her usual warmth in her voice. There was no affectionate "hello, sweetheart," no kind pleasantries. Just my name, spoken like a judgment. "I am calling you directly, niece, because what I have been hearing lately is deeply troubling my spirit, and I need to hear the truth directly from your mouth." I leaned forward in my chair, my stomach tightening into a cold, hard knot of dread. "Aunt Diane, it is wonderful to hear your voice. Please tell me what is wrong." "What is wrong, Isabella," she said, her voice sharp and cutting, "is that your mother has been systematically calling every single member of my board of directors. She's been on the phone with Reverend Kim at the community church. She's been crying in the presence of anyone who will listen to her." She took a long, measured breath, and I could hear the disappointment in her voice. "Patricia is telling people that you have misappropriated family funds, Isabella. She is painting a very detailed picture of a daughter who has become unstable and power-hungry. She is claiming you are using corporate accounts to cover massive personal debts, possibly even gambling debts." I felt the blood drain completely from my face. Gambling debts? It was so specific, so calculated, so perfectly designed to destroy my credibility as a responsible business leader in one decisive blow. "She's also claiming," Aunt Diane continued, her voice tight with obvious distaste, "that you are attempting to extort Victoria. She says this entire situation regarding the canceled wedding is because you are demanding additional money from your sister to allow her to get married, that you are essentially blackmailing your own flesh and blood for financial gain." She paused, and I could hear her take another deep, steadying breath. "These are very serious allegations, Isabella, so I am going to ask you one single time, as the woman who held you on the day you were born, as someone who loved your father like a brother, is any of this true?" Is this the kind of person Richard Chen's daughter has become? Promise. Aunt Diane, I said, and my voice was shaking, not with fear, but with a cold, consuming fury I had never experienced before in my life. That is all. Every single word of it. A complete and total fabrication. It is not just false, Aunt Diane. It is the exact opposite of the truth. I heard her let out a long, slow, relieved sigh. I thought as much, she said, and the warmth finally returned to her voice. You are far too much like your father to be a thief or a con artist. Isabella, Richard Chen knew how to build things, not how to steal them or destroy them. Then you understand what is happening here, I said, the words coming quickly now. They are desperate, Aunt Diane. I cut off their access to unlimited funds. So now they are trying to destroy my reputation and my name so they can justify taking back control. I know exactly what I am seeing, Diane said, her judicial tone returning in full force. And what I am seeing is Patricia and Victoria dragging your father's hard-earned legacy through the absolute mud. They are using his respected name to spread lies and poison throughout this community, Isabella. This is no longer just a private family dispute. This has become a very public assassination of your character. People are whispering. They are taking sides. They are expecting you to be noticeably absent from community events because they believe the lies your mother is spreading. The scholarship gala is next week. People are already saying you will not show your face. You need to take control of this narrative immediately, Isabella, before it completely controls you and destroys everything your father built. Aunt Diane's warning was still echoing in my mind when Monica buzzed my intercom again less than an hour later. Her voice was hesitant, apologetic. Miss Chen, I'm terribly sorry to interrupt again, but Mrs. Eleanor Ng is on line 1. She says it is extremely urgent and concerns the Foundation Gala. My blood ran completely cold. Mrs. Ng was the chairwoman of the entire Asian American Scholarship Foundation, the same gala Aunt Diane had just warned me about. This was the flagship charity event for our community, an event my father had personally co-founded decades ago, and which I now sponsored as the primary financial donor, contributing over $2 million annually. I picked up the phone, keeping my voice steady and professional. Eleanor, how are you? It is good to hear from you. Isabella, she said, and her voice was strained, filled with that very specific kind of polite discomfort that precedes bad news. I am calling about a somewhat delicate matter, and I want you to know how grateful we all are for your family's continued support of the gala over all these years. Your father would be so incredibly proud of your commitment. I waited in silence. The preamble was never a good sign. It is just that, she sighed heavily, in light of the unfortunate rumors that have been circulating recently about your family's situation. Well, several of our other major donors have privately expressed some concern about the current optics. Concern about what specifically, Eleanor? I asked, keeping my voice carefully neutral. They are worried, she said carefully, choosing each word with obvious precision, that your presence at the gala might cause a certain distraction from the primary purpose of the evening, which is, of course, celebrating and supporting our scholarship students. There it was, the polite knife in the back. I, the primary financial sponsor, was being gently asked to stay away from my own event, the event my family had founded, because my mother's lies had been so effective. So you are disinviting me, I stated. It was not a question. It was a simple statement of fact. Oh no, dear, absolutely not, she rushed to say, her voice rising slightly in panic. We would never dream of doing such a thing. We are simply asking, very respectfully, if you might consider making your generous donation publicly as always, but perhaps gracefully stepping back from attending the actual event this year, just until this unfortunate situation with Patricia and Victoria resolves itself naturally. I felt a blinding, white-hot rage, so intense it felt like ice spreading through my veins. My mother's carefully constructed lies had worked perfectly. She had successfully poisoned the community well, turning my own father's friends and his most beloved charitable cause against me. I see, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerously quiet tone. Thank you for making the situation perfectly clear, Eleanor. You have given me a great deal to think about. I will be in touch very soon. I ended the call before she could respond. The humiliation was absolute and complete. It was not about missing a party or a social event. It was about them winning. They had successfully attacked my character, my reputation, and my father's legacy, and they had won this particular battle. I sat in that chair for a long moment, staring at my phone, feeling the weight of what had just happened. And then, in that crystallizing moment, I realized something crucial. Canceling the wedding had been nothing more than a business transaction, a financial move. But this was war for my father's legacy, for everything he had built and stood for. They had constructed their entire social platform on my father's respected name and my money. And now they were weaponizing that platform to systematically destroy me. I realized then that I did not just need to cancel a wedding or freeze some accounts. I needed to burn their entire platform to the ground and salt the earth so nothing could ever grow there again. I sat alone in my office, the silence heavy and oppressive, the echo of Mrs. Ain's polite dismissal still ringing in my ears. Disinvited from my own father's charity, the charity he had built from nothing. They had pushed me too far, backed me into a corner, genuinely believing I was just a checkbook they could close at will. They had mistaken my patience for weakness. They had mistaken my silence for surrender. They thought they were attacking my character and my reputation. They had forgotten that I controlled every aspect of their comfortable lives. I pressed the intercom button decisively. Monica, get Mr. Caldwell and the entire legal team on a conference call immediately. I do not care what they are doing. I need them now. Less than 3 minutes later, my office speakers crackled to life. Isabella, what is wrong? It was Caldwell, my father's longtime trusted attorney and the man who now managed all corporate legal matters. His voice carried genuine concern. Gentlemen, I said, keeping my voice low and absolutely steady, we are done playing defense. The defensive posture ends right now. We are going on offense, and we are going hard. I could hear the rustling of papers and the shuffling of people on the other end of the line. What do you need from us, Isabella? First, I said, I want a complete forensic audit of every single dollar that has left the Chen Family Trust Fund, my mother's personal expense accounts, and my sister's corporate spending account for the past 10 years. Every single transaction, every penny. Isabella, Caldwell started carefully, that is an absolutely massive undertaking. It will take weeks, possibly months. I do not care how long it takes or how much it costs, I said, cutting him off. I want to know every 5-star hotel bill, every leased luxury vehicle, every so-called business dinner in Paris or Milan or Tokyo. My family has been using my father's legacy as their personal unlimited bank account while simultaneously trying to destroy my reputation in our community. I want to know exactly what their lifestyle has cost me. We will start the audit immediately, Caldwell said, his voice now firm and professional. What is your second directive? Second, I continued, I want a comprehensive deep background investigation on Mrs. Constance Worthington, not her public persona or her social credentials. I am sure those are all impeccable and carefully curated. I want everything else. I want her complete financial history. I want to know about her family's old money and exactly where it comes from. I want her credit reports, her past relationships, any legal entanglements, any private settlements, any hidden debts or financial troubles. She wants to marry into the Chen family and threaten me in my own office? I want to know exactly who we are dealing with. I want to know what secrets she is hiding and where every single skeleton is buried. There was a long pause on the line. Isabella, Caldwell said slowly, and I could hear the shift in his tone. This is no longer about a canceled wedding, is it? No, I replied, looking at my father's photograph on my desk. His proud smile forever frozen in time. This is about protecting his name and his legacy by any means necessary, Mr. Caldwell, whatever it takes. The call from Caldwell came less than 36 hours later. I had been expecting a preliminary report about my mother's extravagant spending, or a detailed list of Victoria's failed business ventures and political campaigns. I was absolutely not expecting the gravity and urgency I heard in my attorney's voice. "Isabella," he said, and he sounded exhausted. "We have a serious problem. A much bigger problem than your sister's ego or your mother's social manipulations." I felt my stomach clench into a tight knot. "Go ahead, Caldwell. I am listening. The audit on Victoria and your mother is proceeding, and it is exactly what you would expect. Victoria has been using her corporate card to fund her entire lifestyle for years. Your mother's charitable donations are creative accounting at best. But that is not why I'm calling you right now." He paused, and I heard him take a deep, steadying breath. While my team was auditing the main family trust accounts, they cross-referenced all disbursements with other corporate financial accounts as a standard procedure. They discovered an anomaly, a series of very significant unauthorized wire transfers that have nothing to do with your mother or sister. Unauthorized? How much money are we talking about, Caldwell? "We are looking at approximately $2.3 million over the past 8 months, he said. "Small incremental amounts at first, designed to avoid detection. Then, progressively larger transfers, all carefully funneled through an offshore shell corporation registered in the Cayman Islands." I stood up from my desk so fast, my chair rolled backward and hit the wall. This was no longer family drama or petty theft. This was high-level corporate fraud, potentially criminal activity. "Who?" I demanded, my voice hard. "Victoria? Is my sister really that stupid and that bold?" "That is the part that is deeply troubling me, Isabella." Caldwell replied, "It is definitely not Victoria, and it is certainly not your mother. These transfers are not coming from the family trust accounts they have traditional access to. These funds are being siphoned from a completely different department within the corporate structure. They are sophisticated, carefully routed through 3 different subsidiary companies to mask their true origin. This is professional-level work, Isabella. Whoever is doing this knows our corporate structure intimately." A cold dread settled over me like a heavy blanket. This was an inside job, an internal attack from someone with deep access. "We traced the registration documents for the shell company in the Caymans," Caldwell continued, his voice dropping lower. "It is listed under a generic holding company name, designed to be untraceable. But the financial director who signed off on the initial wire transfer authorizations, the internal executive who approved them, his name is David Park. Does that name mean anything to you at all?" I searched my memory carefully, going through mental lists of employees, executives, board members. "No," I said finally. "Should it?" "Perhaps not directly," Caldwell said. "But my investigator ran a full background check on him. David Park is a junior executive in our finance department. For the past 8 months, he has been making very large, very regular cash deposits into personal accounts. And he has also been observed on multiple occasions outside of work, in private settings with Mrs. Constance Worthington." I stared at my phone, a name echoing in my mind. Constance Worthington and a junior finance executive from my own company. It made no sense initially. What is the connection, Caldwell? Is she blackmailing him? Paying him off for information? What exactly is happening here? "It appears to be a personal relationship, Isabella," Caldwell said, his voice grave and troubled. "My investigator has conducted discreet surveillance over the past week. They have met privately at least 4 times at a boutique hotel downtown. Not one of your properties, thankfully. It is an affair, Isabella. She has been sleeping with him for months." I felt the blood drain completely from my face. This was infinitely darker and more calculated than I had ever imagined possible. "It gets significantly worse," Caldwell continued. "We examined the access protocols and projections for the accounts this man David Park has clearance to. He has been quietly setting up a new wire transfer, a much larger one. $3.8 million. It is scheduled to execute automatically next Monday morning at 9 a.m. The exact same day, Victoria and her fiancé are supposed to leave for their honeymoon in Europe. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying, crystal-clear clarity. Constance was not just a snob or a social climber protecting her family name. She was a predator, a con artist. The $2.3 million she had already stolen was just a test run, a practice round. The wedding was her final masterpiece, her grand finale. She was planning to have Victoria marry her son, gain legal access to the Chen family name and social position. And then, while the happy couple was supposedly on their honeymoon, she and her lover were going to drain the account and disappear into the wind with almost $4 million. My God, I whispered, sinking back into my chair. Victoria, my sister has no idea. She does not know any of this. Exactly, Caldwell confirmed. Victoria is not her partner in this scheme, Isabella. She is her cover, her shield, her perfect alibi. He is the naive pawn that Constance is using to gain access to your family and your fortune. Victoria genuinely believes she is marrying into old money and social prestige. But the truth is, Constance is pulling off what she thinks is the perfect heist, and she is using your sister as the key to the vault. Victoria is not her daughter-in-law. She's just another victim. I fought back to that day in my office. Constance's arrogance, her thinly veiled threats about her husband, the judge, the way she had looked around my office with such dismissive contempt. She had not just been trying to intimidate me or put me in my place. She had been assessing me as a threat, evaluating whether I was smart enough or aware enough to detect her real plan. She was not trying to steal a wedding deposit. She was trying to steal my entire company, piece by piece. I sat with that information for a full hour, letting it settle, letting the implications become clear. My rage was no longer hot. It was ice cold, calculated, absolutely focused. They had not just insulted me or humiliated me. They had declared open war on my father's legacy, on everything he had built. Constance Worthington was not just a snob. She was a criminal, a thief, and she was using my own family as her instrument. I picked up my phone and called my mother directly. I did not wait for her to launch into another tirade. "Mother," I said, letting a weary, defeated sigh carry clearly through the phone line. "You win. This whole situation has completely spiraled out of control. I cannot handle the pressure anymore." There was a sharp intake of breath on her end, a rustling sound, then her voice, cautious but absolutely dripping with barely concealed triumph. "Isabella, what did you just say?" "I said you win," I repeated, making my voice sound weak, resigned, beaten down. "This public fight is destroying me. It is not good for the company. It is not good for Dad's legacy. You were right about everything. I need to fix this situation before it gets even worse. Can you and Victoria please come to my home tonight? And please bring Mrs. Worthington as well. We need to have a private conversation, just family, to resolve this once and for all." "To your home?" she asked, surprised. I had never, not once in 10 years, invited them to my private penthouse residence. "Yes," I said. 7 o'clock tonight. Please." I hung up before she could ask any questions or make any demands. The trap was set. Now I just had to prepare the bait and wait for them to walk directly into it. At exactly 7 o'clock that evening, my private elevator chimed its arrival. Monica escorted them into my penthouse. Patricia, Victoria, and Constance Worthington. They stepped into the foyer and stopped, looking around with barely concealed astonishment. My penthouse was a 3-story masterpiece of glass, steel, and imported marble, with completely unobstructed 360-degree views of the entire San Francisco Bay. It was minimalist, modern, and worth more than most people would earn in several lifetimes. I saw Constance's eyes widen for just a fraction of a second. This was real, substantial, generational wealth. Not the leveraged, mortgaged, carefully maintained illusion of wealth that she was marrying her son into. This was the real thing. Patricia recovered first, her face settling into a mask of maternal pity and condescending concern. "Oh, Isabella," she said, gliding into the main living area as if she owned it. "This is lovely. A bit sterile and cold for my taste, but lovely nonetheless. I see you've been quite comfortable up here, while the rest of us have been worried sick about the family reputation." "Please sit down, Mother," I said, gesturing to the long, curved white sofa that faced the floor-to-ceiling windows. They arranged themselves carefully. Victoria sat next to Constance, looking like a queen holding court, her posture perfect. Constance crossed her legs elegantly, her expression cool and assessing. Patricia sat across from them, looking like the victorious matriarch, finally reclaiming her proper position. "Well," Patricia said, picking an imaginary piece of lint from her designer sleeve, "I am certainly glad you have finally seen reason, Isabella. This entire unfortunate episode has been absolutely exhausting for all of us. The phone calls I have had to make, the damage control, the endless explanations. It has been draining." "Yes," Constance added, her voice smooth as expensive silk. "My husband, the judge, was extremely concerned. He was on the verge of making some very serious calls regarding your business practices and compliance issues. But I suppose we can put all of that on hold now that you are finally being reasonable and mature about this situation." Victoria, as always, simply echoed their sentiments. "Yeah, Bella, you really messed everything up badly, but we are family, we can fix this. You just need to listen to us from now on and stop trying to control everything." They were so absolutely certain they had won. They thought the smear campaign had been successful, that I was coming to them desperate, humiliated, begging for forgiveness and a path back into their good graces. They had absolutely no idea they had just walked willingly into an execution chamber. I let them sit there for a long moment, let them enjoy the view. Let the silence and the sheer overwhelming scale of my home do the talking for me. Finally, Patricia sighed, a long, theatrical sound of profound maternal disappointment. "Isabella," she began, her voice taking on that familiar condescending tone, "I am so relieved you have finally come to your senses. This mess you created, this public spectacle, it has been so deeply damaging to our family name and reputation." I simply looked at her, saying nothing. "Damaging, Mother? Of course it has been damaging," she said, as if explaining something obvious to a small child. The calls I have personally had to field from concerned friends, the whispers at the club, the questions. "Aunt Diane is absolutely furious with you. Reverend Kim is deeply concerned about your stability. You have been openly slandering your own sister, Isabella. You have made this entire family look unstable and dysfunctional. Public perception is everything, and you have made us look terrible." Constance, who had been silently studying an abstract sculpture on my wall, turned back to face me. She gave me a small, tight smile that absolutely did not reach her cold eyes. "What your mother is attempting to say, Isabella, is that we are all greatly relieved you are finally ready to repair this damage. My son and Victoria are prepared to graciously accept your apology, assuming it is sincere." Victoria, sitting beside her future mother-in-law, nodded eagerly. "That is right, Bella. A real apology. A public one that our friends and the community can see. You need to make this right." Constance continued, fully taking control of the conversation now. "We have already spoken with Sophia, your wedding coordinator. She is understandably devastated by your unprofessional behavior and the chaos you caused. But she has indicated she would be willing to reinstate all the vendors and arrangements for an additional coordination fee, of course. The wedding will proceed exactly as originally planned. All you need to do is apologize sincerely and pay." "I see," I said quietly, my voice neutral. "An apology and more money." "Yes," Constance said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world, "and of course, a substantial wedding gift to compensate for all the emotional distress and public embarrassment this situation has caused both families. The original $150,000 deposit was simply that, a deposit for services. We feel an additional $250,000 as a genuine gift would appropriately demonstrate your goodwill, your sincerity, and your commitment to repairing these damaged family relationships. She smiled again coldly. We are family, after all, Isabella. We can certainly be forgiving if you show proper contrition and make appropriate amends. They were so stunningly arrogant, so completely certain of themselves and their position. They had walked into my home after attempting to rob me, after systematically destroying my reputation, and they were now demanding even more money as an apology for me having the audacity to catch them in their lies. I let the silence stretch out uncomfortably. I looked at Victoria, my weak, easily manipulated sister. I looked at Patricia, my calculating, social climbing mother. And I looked at Constance, the viper I had deliberately invited into my home. I let out a long, slow breath, as if I were truly defeated, as if the weight of their expectations had finally broken me. You are right, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You are absolutely right. This has gone much too far. The public perception, the gossip, the damage to the family reputation. I cannot allow this to continue. I looked up slowly, meeting their triumphant gazes directly. Fine, the wedding is back on. I will call Sophia personally tomorrow morning. I will apologize for the confusion and the chaos, and I will pay whatever additional fees are required. Patricia's face broke into a radiant, relieved smile. Oh, Isabella, sweetheart, I knew you would eventually do the right thing. I always knew. Constance's smile was colder, sharper, more predatory. She thought she had just secured her victory. I'm very glad we could come to this understanding, Isabella. It's the mature, appropriate response. And the gift? Victoria asked eagerly, unable to contain her greed. The $250,000? Yes, I said, my voice flat. I will arrange for the funds to be transferred. Consider it my wedding gift and my apology for this entire unfortunate situation. Fleely eager to leave now that they had gotten everything they wanted. Patricia moved toward me as if to embrace me, but I stepped back slightly. There is one more thing, I said quietly. They paused. Constance's hand was already on her designer purse. Since we all agree this kind of public family fighting is destructive and cannot happen again, that it damages Dad's legacy and the family reputation, I had my legal team draft a final family agreement, a binding one. I retrieved a thin, elegant leather portfolio from my desk and held it up. What kind of agreement? Constance asked immediately, her eyes narrowing with instant suspicion. She was sharp. I had to give her that. She could smell a potential trap. A simple, straightforward one, I said, keeping my tone casual and reassuring. It just formalizes and makes permanent our current arrangement. It legally transfers the San Francisco house to you, Mother, completely free and clear. It becomes your property. No strings attached, ever. Patricia's eyes widened with greedy excitement. The house was worth nearly $6 million. For Victoria, I continued smoothly, it transfers full, independent control of her personal trust fund. No more corporate oversight, no more reviews. It becomes her money to manage and spend however she chooses. Victoria looked at Constance with bright, excited eyes. This was everything they had wanted, everything they had been fighting for. In exchange, I said, finally getting to the critical point, it simply requires all three of you to sign, formally acknowledging that this represents a final settlement of Dad's estate. It releases me and Chen Properties International from any and all future financial obligations to the family. No more monthly stipends, no more emergency bailouts, no more corporate credit cards. You receive your assets, and I receive my independence and my peace. It creates clean boundaries, that is all. That is, Victoria started, clearly thrilled. That is more than fair. That is more than generous. Yes, Patricia agreed immediately, stepping forward eagerly toward the document. That is exactly what your father would have wanted, Isabella. A clear, clean division of assets. No more ambiguity or confusion. Only Constance hesitated, hanging back slightly. I do not know, she said slowly, her lawyer instincts clearly activating. My husband should probably review this document before anyone signs anything legally binding. Why? Victoria snapped suddenly, her voice sharp with panic. She was terrified Constance would ruin this opportunity for her. It is exactly what we have been demanding, Constance. He is giving us the house and full control of the trust. It is everything we wanted. This is a victory. Just sign it. She is absolutely right, darling, Patricia urged, seeing her financial security within reach. Do not complicate this unnecessarily. It's a simple, straightforward agreement. Isabella is finally being sensible and reasonable. Constance looked from Victoria's desperate, greedy face to Patricia's anxious, pleading expression. She was trapped. To refuse now, to demand additional legal review, would be to expose her own lack of faith in Victoria, to reveal her hidden agenda and her deeper manipulations. She was being pressured by the very people she was actively planning to betray. With a tight, forced smile, she finally relented. Fine, she said. If it makes everyone feel secure and resolves the situation, then fine, I will sign. I laid the document carefully on the glass coffee table and handed my expensive pen to Patricia first. One by one, they signed their names. Patricia with a flourishing, triumphant signature. Victoria with an eager, hasty scrawl, barely reading the document. And finally, Constance, her signature sharp, precise, and angry. They had just signed their own destruction. They just did not know it yet. The moment the elevator doors closed behind them, the carefully constructed mask of the defeated, compliant daughter vanished from my face instantly. I walked directly back to my desk, my expression turning to cold, hard stone. I picked up my phone and dialed Sophia Martinez, the wedding coordinator. Sophia, this is Isabella Chen. Miss Chen? She answered, sounding genuinely terrified, as if expecting me to sue her personally. I am so sorry about all the confusion and the chaos. Your family, the entire situation has been. The family situation has been resolved, I said, cutting her off smoothly. The wedding is officially back on. I need you to reinstate every single vendor immediately. Oh, she sounded absolutely stunned and relieved. Oh, thank God. Yes, of course, Miss Chen. Right away. I will call the resort and the florists immediately. No, I said. You will do significantly more than that, Sophia. I am not just restoring the event. I am upgrading everything substantially. First, the venue. They are no longer using just the main ballroom at the Palazzo. I want you to book the entire Grand Terrace, the adjoining sculpture garden, and the rooftop observatory as well. I want elaborate fountain displays. I want excessive, over-the-top floral arrangements everywhere. Spare no expense whatsoever. Miss Chen, that is an additional $80,000 at minimum. Second, I continued, ignoring her concern about cost. The catering. The standard menu is canceled entirely. Contact our premium catering division and arrange for the prestige package. That includes the fresh seafood bar, the imported Wagyu beef option for all 250 guests, and the Dom Perignon champagne tower display. I want this to be utterly unforgettable. But Miss Chen, that package alone is nearly. Third, I said, cutting her off again. The guests, the Worthington family and their immediate relatives. I want them moved from the standard guest accommodations. Book them all in the executive suites at the Golden Gate flagship property. And for the bride, for Constance, you will upgrade her to the presidential suite at the Palazzo for the entire week leading up to the wedding. Completely complimentary, of course. There was complete silence on Sophia's end. She was clearly reeling from the sheer, unnecessary extravagance of what I was demanding. Miss Chen, she finally stammered. The new total cost for all of this? It is almost triple the original budget. This is close to $500,000 for a single wedding. I am fully aware of the cost, Sophia, I said calmly. Send all invoices directly to my corporate office. Mark every single one as Chen Family Legacy Project. I want my mother and my sister to see in explicit detail exactly how generous I am being. I want them to see that they are receiving the wedding of the century exactly as promised. Yes, Miss Chen, she said, her voice now filled with a mixture of awe and confusion. I will handle everything personally and immediately. Excellent, I said. And Sophia? One more thing. I want daily updates on all arrangements sent directly to my personal email. Every detail, every decision, every change. Do not leave anything out. I hung up the phone. I wanted them to feel secure, arrogant, drunk on their supposed victory. I wanted Constance to feel so completely confident in her new position, so certain that she had successfully manipulated her way into the Chen family that she would not think twice about executing her final, fatal move. I turned to my computer, where my security team had just uploaded a comprehensive new surveillance file. The trap was set perfectly. Now I just had to watch carefully as the Viper walked directly into it. While my family was busy celebrating their supposed victory and planning elaborate floral arrangements, my internal security team, led by my head of corporate security, a woman named Sarah Russo, was working tirelessly in the shadows. Russo was someone I had personally recruited away from the FBI's white-collar crime division, and she was worth every single penny of her substantial salary. Her team did not just observe. They meticulously documented absolutely everything. She is sloppy, Miss Chen. Russo reported to me during a late-night secure call. Her voice was a low, professional whisper. She thinks because she is intelligent and sophisticated, everyone else must be stupid. She is not even using burner phones or taking basic precautions. She is using an encrypted messaging application. But our inside man, David Park, is not nearly as careful as she is. David Park, the compromised junior finance executive. Russo's team had been monitoring him around the clock for days. They had painted a detailed picture of a man who was completely in over his head, terrified of being caught, but utterly infatuated with Constance. He was a classic pawn in her elaborate game. They met again last night, Russo continued. At that boutique hotel in the financial district. We have clear audio recordings from the adjoining suite. Would you like me to play a brief excerpt? Please, I said. There was a click, and then Constance's voice filled my office speakers. It was clear, sharp, and coldly commanding. The transfer must execute at exactly 9:15 a.m. on Monday, David. Not 1 minute earlier, not 1 minute later. We will both be at the wedding ceremony when it happens. My alibi will be absolutely perfect. By the time anyone at the company mentions the missing funds, we will already be on a private flight to Zurich. The recording clicked off. Russo's voice returned. She has convinced him the transfer is a justified action, Miss Chen. She has told him repeatedly that you have been stealing from your own family for years, that this is simply reclaiming what rightfully belongs to them. He genuinely believes he is helping correct an injustice. She has completely manipulated him. She is brilliant. I will absolutely give her that credit. But she is also dangerously arrogant. You have the complete bank routing codes? You have the account numbers for the Cayman Shell Corporation? I asked. We have everything, Miss Chen, Russo confirmed. We have photographs of every meeting. We have complete transcripts of their messages. We have a full financial profile on David Park, including the $750,000 condominium she has already purchased for him using cash, likely from the first $2.3 million she successfully siphoned. We have the entire conspiracy documented from beginning to end, every detail. I looked at the file on my desk. It was now almost 4 inches thick. The evidence was overwhelming, irrefutable, absolutely damning. She is not just planning to steal from me, I said quietly. She is planning to frame Victoria's new husband's family for the corporate loss and then disappear with her lover. She is destroying multiple families. What are your orders, Miss Chen? Russo asked. We can have federal authorities pick her up right now. We can stop the transfer before it even executes. I thought carefully for a long moment. No, that would be far too easy, too clean. A quiet arrest would not teach my family the brutal lesson they desperately needed to learn. "No, Russo," I said, my voice cold and absolutely final. "You do nothing to stop it. You let the transfer protocol stand exactly as planned. You let them think they are succeeding. I want her to walk down that aisle. I want her to stand at that altar thinking she has just pulled off the perfect crime. I want her to believe she has won." My next call was to Aunt Diane. I needed her there as a witness, as the moral authority of our community. "Aunt Diane," I said, injecting warmth and sincerity into my voice. I was absolutely devastated by the situation with Mrs. Ng and the foundation, but I completely understand. The foundation and the work Dad loved must be protected from gossip and scandal at all costs. I want to clear the air properly. Would you, Mrs. Ng, and the entire executive board be my personal guests for a private dinner tomorrow night at the Palazzo? I want to discuss the future of my family's sponsorship and my commitment to the community." She was hesitant initially, clearly uncertain, but I was quietly persuasive, and she ultimately could not refuse a direct meeting with her organization's largest donor. That evening, I had them all seated in the private wine cellar of the Palazzo Resort, surrounded by bottles worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. The atmosphere was tense, uncomfortable. Mrs. Ng looked extraordinarily uncomfortable, clearly expecting me to angrily pull all my funding and threaten legal action. Aunt Diane simply watched me carefully, her expression unreadable, assessing. "Thank you all so much for coming tonight," I began, raising a glass of sparkling water. "I know there have been terrible, vicious rumors circulating about me recently, lies spread by my own family members. I completely understand the difficult position the board found itself in regarding the gala. I hold absolutely no ill will toward any of you." Mrs. Ng let out a small, relieved sigh. "In fact," I continued, "I believe that in times of family crisis and public scrutiny, our commitment to the community must be even stronger than ever before. My father believed that deeply, which is precisely why I asked you here tonight. I want to announce that I am doubling my annual contribution to the scholarship fund, effective immediately." The entire table gasped audibly. The new donation amount was over $4 million. "Isabella," Aunt Diane said, her eyes wide with shock. "That is extraordinarily generous, especially given the current circumstances and the stress you must be under." "This is because of these circumstances that I am doing this," I said. "I have only one condition, one specific request. This new donation, this family legacy grant in my father's name, I do not want to announce it at the public gala. I feel that is no longer the appropriate venue given everything that has happened." Mrs. Ng's face fell slightly, clearly thinking she had deeply offended me after all. "Instead," I said, "I want to announce this donation at my sister's rehearsal dinner in 2 days. It will be a complete surprise, a way to demonstrate to the community and to my family that the Chen legacy of giving back is stronger than any petty gossip or family disputes. I would be deeply honored if all of you, the entire board, would attend as my personal guests when I make this public announcement." They sat in stunned silence. Not only was I not angry with them, I was dramatically increasing my financial commitment and publicly sharing the credit and recognition with them. "Isabella," Mrs. Ng said, her voice thick with genuine emotion, "that is the most honorable, gracious thing I have ever witnessed. We would be absolutely privileged and honored to attend." I smiled warmly. Perfect. The bait was taken. I had just secured the most respected, influential members of the Asian American community in San Francisco as my witnesses. They thought they were coming to observe an act of extraordinary family generosity and community commitment. They had absolutely no idea they were about to have front row seats to a public execution. The rehearsal dinner was held in the Palazzo's spectacular Versailles ballroom, the crown jewel of my property. I had ensured it was absolutely breathtaking. The entire room was draped in cream and gold silk, with literally thousands of white orchids and roses hanging from crystal chandeliers that sparkled like stars. A string quartet played softly in the corner. The air was heavy with the scent of expensive flowers and even more expensive perfume. It was a perfect picture of two powerful families uniting. On one side of the elegant room sat the Worthington family. Constance's husband, Judge Christopher Worthington, sat at the head table like an emperor, his face stern and perpetually unimpressed, as if this entire lavish display was merely barely adequate for his standards. Constance herself was absolutely radiant, moving gracefully between tables, her practiced laugh light and musical. She was the perfect mother of the groom, the consummate hostess, the picture of old money grace. On the other side sat my family. My mother, Patricia, was fluttering anxiously around Judge Worthington like a nervous bird, laughing far too loudly at his dry comments, absolutely desperate for his approval and acceptance. My sister Victoria stood near the elaborate champagne tower, already on her fourth glass, loudly regaling Constance's relatives with exaggerated stories of her influence and connections throughout San Francisco society. And then there was my table, positioned prominently near the front, my invited guests, Aunt Diane, Mrs. Eng, and the complete executive board of the Scholarship Foundation. They sat with quiet dignity, observing the scene carefully, clearly feeling somewhat separate from the giddy celebration happening around them. They genuinely believed they were present for a surprise charitable announcement, a moment of family unity and community generosity. I walked into the ballroom, and for just a moment, the energy in the room seemed to shift and pause. "Isabella, darling," my mother rushed over immediately, grabbing my arm tightly. Her smile was wide, bright, and desperately brittle. "You are here. You simply must come say hello properly to Christopher. Judge Worthington has been so looking forward to finally meeting you properly." She practically dragged me across the room toward Constance's imposing husband. "Judge Worthington," I said warmly, extending my hand professionally. "It is truly a pleasure to finally meet you. I am Isabella Chen." The judge looked me up and down with slow, deliberate scrutiny, his eyes cold and assessing. He shook my hand briefly, his grip firm but perfunctory. "Ah yes," he said, his voice deep and dismissive. "The property manager, Constance, mentioned you. I understand there was some family confusion about the wedding arrangements and financial responsibilities." I smiled, a polite, empty, meaningless smile. "Just a small misunderstanding within the family, Judge. Nothing significant. Everything has been sorted out completely now. All resolved. See?" my mother said brightly, patting my arm in an overly familiar way. "All sorted out beautifully. Just a little family miscommunication. Nothing serious." I politely excused myself from their presence and moved to my own table, taking my seat beside Aunt Diane. "Thank you all again for coming tonight," I said quietly to my guests. "What is this really about, Isabella?" Aunt Diane whispered, her sharp eyes studying my face carefully. "This feels like more than a charitable announcement." "Just a family matter, Auntie," I replied, straightening the napkin on my lap. "A matter of legacy and truth." Just then, Victoria and Constance moved together toward the center of the room, both tapping their crystal champagne glasses with silver forks. The clear, ringing sound cut through the low murmur of conversation. The room gradually quieted. Victoria looked flushed with champagne and pride and excitement. Constance looked like a cat who had just swallowed an entire cage of canaries. This was their moment of complete triumph. If you feel my words, show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And tell me from which city you belong, so I can see how far a woman's impactful voice can reach. Help me build this community so we can bring more truthful stories for you. Victoria stood up slowly, her face glowing with champagne-induced confidence and pride. She tapped her glass again with her fork, the clear sound ringing out across the ballroom. "If I could have everyone's attention, please," she said, her voice slightly too loud. "Everyone, thank you so much. My beautiful future mother-in-law, Constance, would like to say a few words to all of you." She looked at Constance with such obvious, blind adoration and trust, it was almost painful to witness. Constance rose gracefully, every movement calculated and perfect. She was a vision in an elegant champagne-colored gown. She picked up her crystal flute and gave a small, modest smile as if she were overwhelmed by the attention. It was a masterful performance. "Thank you all so very much for being here tonight," she began, her voice sweet, warm, and melodic. "It means absolutely everything to our families to have you all here, to see the Worthingtons and the Chens coming together like this. It truly is a dream come true for all of us." She paused deliberately, her eyes scanning the room with practiced ease, landing briefly on her husband, the judge, who gave her a curt, approving nod. "I want to thank my wonderful family for their endless support," she continued. "And of course, I want to thank my new family. Patricia, you have been an absolute rock of support and grace. Victoria, you are truly everything I could have hoped for in a daughter-in-law." Then she turned her gaze directly toward me. Her smile widened, but somehow it still did not reach her cold eyes. This was the moment she had been waiting for, savoring. "And," she said, raising her glass slightly in my direction, "a very special heartfelt thank you to Isabella." The room became even quieter, the tension palpable. Everyone in attendance knew exactly who I was. Everyone had heard at least some version of the rumors and the gossip. This was pure, calculated theater. "I know," Constance said, her voice dropping into a tone of gentle, forgiving sincerity, designed to sound humble, "that we had some small misunderstandings and bumps along the way. Planning a wedding of this scale is incredibly stressful for everyone involved, is it not?" She gave a light, practiced laugh, and a few people in the crowd laughed politely along with her. "But I want everyone here to know," she continued, looking directly at me with false warmth, "that Isabella has truly demonstrated what family means. She has proven herself to be extraordinarily generous. She has single-handedly funded this entire beautiful event we are celebrating. We genuinely could not have done any of this without her financial support and her resources." It was a perfectly delivered insult, wrapped in layers of false gratitude and public praise. She had just reduced me publicly to nothing more than a checkbook, painted me as the difficult family member who had finally been brought to heel and forced to pay for everything. "So please," she finished, her smile bright and triumphant, "everyone raise your glasses in gratitude to my new sister, Isabella, for her incredible, incredible generosity to this family." The room erupted in enthusiastic applause. My mother, Patricia, was dabbing dramatically at her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief, absolutely thrilled. Victoria was clapping enthusiastically, grinning widely. Aunt Diane and Mrs. Ng at my table looked at me with expressions of confusion, pity, and discomfort. They thought I had been humiliated, that the rumors were true, that I had been forced to buy my way back into my own family's good graces with money. I simply smiled calmly, picked up my own glass, and took a slow, deliberate sip. I held Constance's gaze across the room. Then I set my glass down carefully and slowly, very deliberately, I stood up. It was my turn now. The applause was still echoing through the ballroom, a mixture of polite respect for Constance's touching speech and genuine enthusiasm for what appeared to be a family reconciliation and healing. I let the sound wash over me for a moment. I looked at Constance, who was smiling radiantly, her eyes absolutely glittering with pure victory. I looked at Victoria, who was beaming at me with drunken affection, as if I were finally behaving properly. I looked at my mother, who was still dabbing at her eyes theatrically, the perfect picture of a proud, relieved matriarch who had successfully brought her wayward daughter back into line. I glanced briefly at my own table. Aunt Diane refused to meet my eyes directly. Mrs. Ng and the other board members looked deeply uncomfortable, their faces showing a mixture of pity and secondhand embarrassment on my behalf. They all genuinely believed I had been defeated, humiliated, forced into submission. I waited patiently. I let the applause die down completely, fade into nothing, until the only sound remaining was the distant, soft playing of the string quartet in the corner. Every single eye in the room turned toward me, expecting a short, appropriately humble, apologetic speech of gratitude. "Thank you, Constance," I began, my voice carrying easily across the now silent ballroom. "That was a truly remarkable speech, and thank you all for that very generous, warm welcome." I looked around the room slowly, deliberately, making eye contact with Victoria, with my mother, and finally settling my gaze on Judge Worthington himself, Constance's husband. "Constance is absolutely correct about one thing," I said, my smile never wavering. "Generosity is a very interesting, powerful word. It is a word that has defined the Chen family for generations. My father, Richard Chen, believed deeply, passionately in generosity. He believed in giving back to the community that supported him." I turned slightly, raising my glass toward Aunt Diane and the foundation board members at my table. "He believed in supporting our cultural institutions, our community organizations, our churches, our scholarship programs for deserving students. He believed that our success was never truly our own, but was something sacred to be shared generously with others." I paused, turning my attention deliberately back to the head table where my family sat. "But my father also believed," I continued, "that generosity and respect were two sides of the exact same coin. He believed that family legacy was not simply about money, which seems to be the primary topic of conversation this evening. He believed legacy was fundamentally about integrity, about honesty, about fiercely protecting the family name from those who would exploit it or damage it for personal gain." I heard my mother let out a small, sharp gasp of realization, but I did not stop speaking. I did not pause, and I have heard my name mentioned frequently recently. I continued, my voice still light and conversational. "In private board meetings, in hushed phone calls with community pastors, at the country club bar. I have heard that I am unstable. I have heard rumors that I have secret gambling debts. I have heard whispers that I am attempting to blackmail my own sister, my own flesh and blood." The room went absolutely, completely still. You could have heard a pin drop on the marble floor. Marcus and Victoria froze. Victoria's champagne glass was halfway to her lips, suspended in midair. Constance's radiant smile vanished instantly, replaced by a mask of wary confusion and dawning alarm. My mother looked as if she had just seen an actual ghost. "So," I continued, my voice still calm, still measured, "I wanted to take this opportunity, standing here in front of both our families and our community, to set the record absolutely straight, to clear the air once and for all." I turned my full attention to Judge Worthington, Constance's powerful husband. "Judge," I said, "I was introduced to you earlier this evening as the property manager. I completely understand the confusion. My family has enjoyed that particular joke for many years now. It has become a comfortable fiction. But the truth, the actual truth, is that I am not simply the manager of the Chen Palazzo Resort." I let my gaze sweep slowly across every shocked face at the head table, watching the dawning horror spread. "I am the sole owner," I said clearly. "I own this entire building we are standing in. I own Martinez Premier Florals, the company providing every single flower you see. I own the entire Golden Gate luxury resort chain. My father left everything, the entire corporation, to me when he passed." The collective gasp that went through the room was audible, almost physical. Judge Worthington's face went rigid. Victoria looked like she could not breathe. Constance's knuckles were bone white against her champagne glass. "I am not living in my father's shadow, Victoria," I said, looking directly at my sister. "I am his shadow. I am his legacy. I am the person who has been quietly running this empire for 10 solid years, while you spent my money and called it your career. And I am indeed the walking ATM that Constance so accurately, so eloquently described when she stood in my office and threatened me. I have been systematically funding this entire family's lifestyle, including every aspect of the life you have been presenting to the world as your own accomplishment, Victoria." I stood up straighter, picking up my champagne glass from the table. The room was frozen in absolute shock. "Thank you, Constance," I said, looking directly at her with cold eyes. What a generous toast that was to family and to my financial contributions. You are absolutely right. There has been a tremendous amount of discussion about family lately, about legacy, about generosity, about truth. My gaze swept the room one final time. Judge Worthington, when I was introduced to you this evening, I believe you referred to me dismissively as the property manager. I understand that confusion completely. My family has been deliberately downplaying my actual role for many years. It has been their favorite ongoing joke at my expense. I took a deliberate sip of my champagne, but I am here tonight to set that record completely straight because my father, Richard Chen, did not raise me to be a liar, and he certainly did not raise me to tolerate being lied about by my own family. I set the glass down with a soft click. The truth is, Judge, I do not simply manage hotels or properties. I let that statement settle heavily in the silent air. I own them, I said. The silence that followed my words was profound and absolute. Someone's fork clattered against a plate somewhere in the back of the room. I own this building, this resort we are standing in, I continued, my voice growing stronger and clearer with each word. I own Martinez Premier Florals, the company responsible for every beautiful arrangement you see tonight. I own the Golden Gate Resort chain, where every single one of you is staying. In fact, I own all of it. The entire corporate empire my father built, Chen Properties International. He left it entirely to me 10 years ago when he passed away. I turned my gaze from the judge to my family, to my mother and sister who looked as if they had been physically struck. And in those 10 years, I said, looking directly at them, I have not been failing or hiding or struggling. I have been working harder than you could possibly imagine. I have taken the 12 domestic properties my father left me and grown this company into a truly global enterprise. We now own 72 international properties spanning from London to Singapore to Sydney, with 4 more opening this quarter alone. The room was frozen, completely, utterly paralyzed. Patricia and Victoria looked pale, their eyes wide with disbelief and dawning, sickening horror. The walking ATM they had tried so hard to control and manipulate. The family failure they had publicly humiliated and disinvited was not struggling at all. She was the entire bank. She owned everything. I let that reality sink in deeply, watching the color drain completely from my mother's carefully made-up face. Victoria looked as if she might actually faint. Constance's cold eyes were darting frantically between me and her husband, her expression hardening into barely concealed fury and panic. And during those same 10 years, I continued, turning my attention to my sister. While I was building that international empire brick by brick, I was also quietly, graciously funding your entire lifestyle, Victoria. And yours as well, Mother. I looked toward Aunt Diane and the shocked board members. You see, my family has been enjoying the substantial benefits and fruits of my labor, living off my corporate earnings, while simultaneously telling this entire community, our friends, our neighbors, that I was the failure, that I was unstable, that I was the one struggling and causing problems. I turned back to Victoria, who looked physically ill now. Every single maxed-out credit card, every failed political campaign you ran, every luxury car lease, every designer shopping trip, every so-called business expense. Victoria, all of it was paid for with my money, not family money, not Dad's money. My money from my company that I built. You have not been living off Dad's legacy for the past decade. You have been living entirely off my paycheck, my work, my success. This is outrageous. My mother, Patricia, finally found her voice stammering. Elijah, how dare you? This is a private family matter. You should not be. You made it a public matter, Mother, I said, cutting her off sharply. You made it public when you told Reverend Kim I was a gambler with debts. You made it public when you convinced your friends at the foundation to disinvite me from Dad's own gala. You made it public when you conspired to steal my $150,000 deposit, after canceling my invitation to this very wedding. A shocked murmur rippled through the assembled crowd. Judge Worthington stood up slowly, his face dark red. His voice was cold, controlled, and definitely not directed at me. It was aimed squarely at Victoria. "Miss Chen," he said, his voice dangerously low. "What exactly is she talking about? You and your mother both told me explicitly, repeatedly, that you were the one running this corporation, that you were the head of the Chen family business." Victoria opened her mouth, but no sound came out at all. She looked desperately, frantically at Constance, then at our mother. "Dad," Constance started, her voice shaking slightly. "Dad, this is just, she is lying. This is a manipulation. She is twisting everything. She's always been jealous and—" "Lying?" I asked, my voice dangerously soft now. "You want to talk about lying and manipulation, Constance?" I turned deliberately back to face the room, to face the horrified, confused crowd. "He is absolutely right to ask questions, Judge. You deserve the complete truth. You were told lies. You want to talk about truth and lies?" I continued. "Let me tell you the complete truth about how this all started. This misunderstanding about the wedding began when my mother and my sister conspired together to cancel my invitation and then attempted to steal and keep my $150,000 deposit as if it had been a gift." Another collective gasp went through the room like a wave. My mother looked as if I had struck her physically across the face. "Elijah, that is absolutely—" "Is it, Mother?" I challenged. "I have the recorded call logs from Sophia Martinez, the wedding coordinator, documenting your exact words, your exact instructions. She is willing to testify under oath if necessary. You did not just disinvite me from this celebration. You tried to make me pay for the privilege of being humiliated and erased. That's precisely why I initially canceled this wedding. That's why I froze all the family accounts." Judge Worthington looked at Constance, his face like stone. His voice was hard, unforgiving. "Is this true, Constance? Did you know about this theft?" Constance's face had gone pale beneath her expertly applied makeup, but she held her ground stubbornly. "It was a family financial matter, Dad. A private misunderstanding between siblings. Denise was simply handling it appropriately. I can absolutely nothing to do with it directly." "Is actually the first honest thing you have said tonight, Constance. You are absolutely right. You had nothing to do with that particular theft." I paused deliberately, letting the attention in the entire room focus solely on her. $150,000 is pocket change to you, is it not, Constance? You were never interested in wedding deposits or my sister's petty games. You are not marrying your son into this family for social status or appearances. You are after something much, much larger. "What are you talking about?" she snapped, her carefully constructed composure finally cracking. Her voice was sharp, almost panicked. "I am marrying into this family because I love Victoria's brother, because this is a good match between our families." "No, Constance," I said, shaking my head slowly. "You are not. You are marrying your son into this family because you believed, incorrectly, that he was the key to accessing the Chen fortune. You did not want $150,000. You wanted millions. You wanted all of it. This is absolutely insane," Victoria shouted, her voice breaking. "Bella, what are you even talking about? Constance loves our family. She has been nothing but supportive." "He is not insane, Victoria," I said, looking at my sister with something close to pity. "He is just tragically, painfully gullible." "Tell me, Constance," I said, turning back to her. "Does the name David Park mean anything to you? A junior executive in my finance department? A man you have been secretly meeting at hotels 3 times a week for the past 8 months? A man you have been having an affair with?" Constance's face transformed into a mask of pale, tightly controlled fury and fear. She took a step toward me, her hand raised slightly as if to strike me. "I have no idea what you are talking about," she hissed, her voice low and threatening. "You are delusional, paranoid. You are making up lies to ruin me, to ruin this wedding, because you are bitter and jealous and alone. Victoria, completely lost and confused, looked frantically between us. Constance, who is David? What affair? What is she talking about? She is talking about your future mother-in-law's lover, I said, letting each word land with precision. The man she has been sleeping with. The man she has been using to systematically steal from my company. How dare you, Constance shrieked, lunging forward. But 2 security officers materialized seemingly from nowhere, blocking her path instantly. You disgusting, vile woman. You are fabricating all of this to destroy me. Am I? I asked calmly. I raised my right hand high above my head, where every single person in the room could see it clearly. And I snapped my fingers once. The sound echoed in the vast, silent ballroom. On cue, as if choreographed, the grand double doors at the far end of the ballroom burst open dramatically. Slamming against the walls with a loud crash, every head in the room whipped around in shock. 2 uniformed officers from my corporate security team, Sarah Russell and another agent, stepped into the room. They were imposing, professional, their faces completely impassive. Following directly behind them was my attorney, Mr. Caldwell, holding his signature leather briefcase. But it was the man walking between the security officers that captured every bit of attention in that room. He was young, maybe 30 years old, dressed in an expensive but wrinkled suit. His face was completely ashen, slick with cold sweat. He was trembling so violently he could barely walk upright. It was David Park. "What is this?" my mother whispered, clutching at her pearl necklace. "Elijah, what is the meaning of this?" I did not answer her. I simply watched Constance. She had gone absolutely rigid, frozen in place. All the blood had drained from her face, leaving only her wide face, terrified eyes. She knew exactly what this was. She knew her entire plan had just collapsed. Russo and the other agent escorted David to the center of the ballroom, positioning him directly in front of the head table, like an exhibit in a courtroom. They flanked him on both sides, preventing any possibility of escape. "Elijah," Judge Worthington demanded, his voice booming with judicial authority. "You have exactly 10 seconds to explain what is happening here. Who is this man?" "This, Judge," I said, my voice cutting cleanly through the shocked silence, "is David Park. And yes, he is Constance's lover. But more importantly, he is also her co-conspirator in corporate fraud." "Conspirator?" the judge repeated, his eyes narrowing dangerously. "That is an extremely serious allegation, Miss Chen. You had better be prepared to prove it immediately." "Oh, I absolutely can, Judge," I said. I find it fascinating that a junior finance executive with a modest salary suddenly had $750,000 in cash to purchase a luxury condominium. The exact amount, coincidentally, that was systematically siphoned from my corporation's accounts over the past 8 months through carefully hidden offshore transfers. Constance, who had been frozen, finally found her voice again. "This is completely insane," she yelled, her voice breaking with desperation. "This is a setup. He is lying. Isabella is paying him to lie. She is trying to frame me because she is vindictive." "Am I, Constance?" I asked. "Or were you and David just getting started? Because my security team has documented something far more interesting than your past thefts. They have discovered your final planned transfer, the big one." David Park, still trembling violently, let out a small choked sob. "This loving couple," I said to the room, gesturing between David and Constance, "has been systematically draining my company, and they had one final transfer scheduled, $4.2 million, set to execute automatically Monday morning at 9:15 a.m., right after the marriage certificate was signed, right as the happy couple was supposedly leaving for their honeymoon in Europe." I let that information sink in, watching comprehension dawn on faces throughout the room. "She was not marrying your son, despite him being unremarkable, Judge," I said, looking directly at Worthington. She was marrying him precisely because he is unremarkable, because he is naive and trusting. She needed him as her cover, her alibi, her shield. Victoria was never her partner. Victoria was her victim, her pawn, the key she needed to access my family and my fortune. Victoria is not her beloved daughter-in-law. She is just another person Constance planned to rob and abandon. You were not her husband's heir, Victoria. You were her mark. Lies, Constance shrieked, her face contorted. He is making this all up. There is no proof. David, tell them. Tell them she is lying. Tell them this is all fake. David, who had been silent and sobbing quietly, just completely crumpled. He fell to his knees on the marble floor. I am so sorry, he wept openly. I am so sorry. She told me it was justified. She said Isabella had been stealing from the family for years. She said we were just taking back what was rightfully theirs. She promised we would be together. She promised. That is not proof? Constance screamed desperately at her father. He is weak. He's lying. They are conspiring against me together. You want proof? I asked. I nodded to Caldwell. My attorney pressed a button on a small remote control device. The large display screens on either side of the ballroom, which had been showing a tasteful slideshow of Victoria and her fiancé, suddenly flickered to black. And then video footage appeared. It was security camera footage, grainy but clear, from a hotel bar. Constance and David, heads close together, speaking in hushed, intimate tones. And then the audio began to play. Constance's voice filled the entire ballroom, crystal clear and damning. The transfer must execute at exactly 9:15 Monday morning, David. Not 1 minute before. We will both be at the ceremony. My alibi will be perfect. By the time anyone at that company notices, we will be on a private plane to Zurich. The audio clicked off. The ballroom was filled with heavy, suffocating silence. Every single person in that room was frozen in absolute shock. David was still sobbing on the marble floor. Constance stood rigid, her face a waxy mask of horror. Victoria looked completely shattered, broken. The first person to move was Judge Christopher Worthington. He turned his head slowly, mechanically, toward his wife. When he spoke, his voice was not a yell or a scream. It was low, cold, and more terrifying than any shout could ever be. Constance, he said, is this true? Constance's head snapped toward him. Her eyes were wild, desperate, cornered. No, she said, but her voice cracked. No, Christopher, it is him. It is all lies. It is manipulated. It is. Her denial was frantic, hollow, crumbling. No one in that room believed her, not even her own husband. The wedding, Judge, I said, my voice cutting through her desperate protests, was never about love or family or social position. It was her final con, her masterpiece. She was going to marry her son into my family, gain the Chen name and legal access. And then, while everyone celebrated, she and David were going to empty my accounts and disappear. Victoria was never her partner or her ally. Victoria was her victim. My sister had not said a single word. She was staring at Constance, the woman she had trusted completely, the woman she had defended against me. She looked at David, the stranger, Constance's secret lover. Then she looked at me, and I saw her face crumble as the full, devastating truth finally crashed over her like a wave. She had been used, manipulated, betrayed. She was not marrying into old money and prestige. She was being set up as the fall guy for a multi-million-dollar theft. You, Victoria whispered, her voice barely audible. You never cared. Constance just stared at her, saying nothing. There was nothing left to say. Her mask had been ripped away completely. Judge Worthington stood slowly. His face was hard, carved from stone. He looked at his wife not with anger, but with cold, absolute disgust. Constance, he said, you have destroyed this family. You have destroyed my name, my reputation, everything I have built in my career. I walked toward the center of the room, standing beside David Park, who was still on his knees. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, addressing the entire shocked crowd. Dr. Constance Worthington and her accomplice, David Park, will be formally arrested and charged by federal authorities with wire fraud, conspiracy, and attempted grand larceny. The evidence is overwhelming and irrefutable. My voice was calm, steady, final. "As for this wedding," I said, "there will not be one." I turned to look at Victoria, my sister. She looked small, broken, humiliated beyond measure. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "You deserve better than this, Victoria," I said, quietly. "You deserve better than being used as a pawn in someone else's con." Judge Worthington spoke, his voice filled with cold authority. "Miss Chen," he said, looking at me directly, "I apologize on behalf of my family. This is unconscionable. I had no knowledge of any of this. I will cooperate fully with any investigation." "I know you did not, Judge," I said. "You were a victim of her lies as well." He turned to his wife. "Constance, I want you out of my house tonight. Our marriage is over. I will be filing for divorce immediately." Then he turned and walked out of the ballroom, his back straight, his dignity intact. Constance stood there, abandoned, exposed, ruined. Security moved in and quietly escorted her and David Park out of the ballroom. The room was still frozen in shock. No one knew what to say or do. I turned to face my mother and my sister. Patricia looked small, defeated, finally understanding what she had done. Victoria just looked broken. "Mother," I said, "do you remember that family agreement you signed so eagerly 2 nights ago? The one that transferred the house to you and gave Victoria independent control of her trust?" She just stared at me, her face pale. "It has been filed and is now legally binding. The house is yours. But as clearly stated in that agreement, all family trust funds, all monthly stipends, all corporate credit cards, everything has been permanently terminated. You are on your own now. Congratulations." Patricia let out a small, strangled sound. The house was hers, but she had just lost the millions required to maintain it. She had signed away her entire lifestyle. I picked up my champagne glass one final time. I raised it high, addressing the entire silent, shocked room. "Congratulations on the wedding," I said, my voice clear. "Do not worry. Everything tonight is fully paid for. The champagne, the flowers, the elaborate meal. All of it. Consider it my final gift to this family." I set the glass down, untouched. I straightened my dress, looked at Aunt Diane, who was staring at me with something like awe, and I turned my back on all of them. I walked out of that ballroom slowly, calmly. My footsteps echoed on the marble. I walked out, leaving them behind in the ruins, in the wreckage, in the silence. The fallout from that night was immediate, devastating, and absolute. My legal team, acting on the mountain of evidence we had compiled, contacted federal authorities within hours. Constance Worthington and her lover David Park were arrested the following morning, just hours before the wedding was supposed to begin. They were charged with multiple counts of wire fraud, criminal conspiracy, attempted grand larceny, and embezzlement. The scandal was absolutely explosive. Judge Christopher Worthington, humiliated by his wife's actions and her very public betrayal, immediately filed for legal separation and then divorce. He also voluntarily recused himself from the bench pending a comprehensive ethics investigation to ensure he had not been compromised by his wife's criminal activities. His reputation, carefully built over decades, was left in ruins. He publicly disowned Constance in a formal statement, claiming he had been deceived and manipulated just like everyone else. Whether that was entirely true or not, no one would ever know. Victoria, my sister, was perhaps the most tragic figure in all of this. She had been humiliated, left at the altar by a family that had been arrested for trying to rob ours. The wedding was obviously canceled, but her humiliation went far deeper than that. That simple family agreement she had signed so eagerly, so greedily, was completely ironclad and legally binding. The very next day, I exercised my legal right to enforce it to the letter. The family trust fund was permanently, irrevocably dissolved. With no income, no fiancé, no prospects, and no safety net, Victoria was forced to sell the San Francisco mansion I had just signed over to my mother. The house was literally her only remaining asset. She used the proceeds to pay back the massive debts she had secretly accumulated over the years, debts she had always assumed I would just continue paying forever without question. She never thought the money would actually stop. My mother, Patricia, her punishment was perhaps the cruelest of all. She had the house, technically, but she had lost everything else. She had lost her son, her money, her access, and most importantly, the one thing she had always prized above everything else, her social standing, her reputation. The Asian American community in San Francisco is incredibly tight-knit, and the story of her greed, her vicious lies about her own daughter, and her complicity in Constance's criminal scheme spread through the community like wildfire. She was quietly removed from every charity board she had sat on. Reverend Kim publicly condemned what he called the sin of familial greed and betrayal from the pulpit. Her so-called friends stopped returning her calls entirely. She was, in a word, finished, erased. I stood in the grand ballroom of the Palazzo Resort exactly 1 month later. This time, it was for the Scholarship Foundation Gala, the event I had originally been disinvited from. But everything had changed now. After the truth came out, after my name was cleared, I had doubled my donation exactly as I had promised. Mrs. Ng stood beside me now, her hand resting gently on my arm as we watched the crowd of scholarship recipients and their families. "Your father would be so incredibly proud, Isabella," she said, her voice soft and full of emotion. "Not just of what you have built in business, but of how you protected his legacy, how you protected his name and his values." I looked out at the sea of grateful faces, all of them smiling at me now, respecting me, understanding the truth finally. My mother and Victoria were nowhere to be seen. They were pariahs now, ghosts. "Legacy is not about money, Mrs. Ng," I said finally, the words feeling true and right. "It is about respect. It is about integrity. It is about truth." As I raised my glass to the crowd, surrounded by people who finally understood who I really was, I smiled. For the first time in my entire adult life, I was completely and totally free. This story teaches us that true power is never about being the loudest voice in the room or having the most impressive title. It is about quiet competence, strategic patience, and protecting what truly matters. Isabella was dismissed and underestimated by her own family, treated as nothing more than a walking bank account. Yet she controlled the entire empire in silence. While her family obsessed over social status and appearances, Isabella focused on protecting the real value of her father's legacy, his integrity, and his name. The ultimate victory was not just exposing their greed and their crimes, it was proving that those who underestimate you rarely understand the true source of real power. Integrity, truth, and strategic silence are the real foundations of any lasting legacy. Have you ever had to prove your worth to a family that completely underestimated you? Have you ever been dismissed by the people who should have supported you? Share your story in the comments below. If you feel my words, show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And tell me from which city you belong, so I can see how far a woman's impactful voice can reach. Help me build this community so we can bring more truthful stories for you.